Good evening. Another Tuesday and a warm Tuesday as well. Goodness me, I weren't too sure when the warm weather was going to come, but here we are again on a Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock, and just want to say a huge thank you for those of you who are watching live or on catch up. I think the sound engineer is on it this evening. I'm back on Facebook. A notice came up, so I'm just waiting for the thumbs up. It should be okay, but I just want to make sure that things are going okay on Facebook and YouTube as well. So I'm just going to hang on for a moment as we look at our topic for this evening, moral injury and its psychological dramas. And I'll say more about that in a moment. Oh, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, on YouTube. And if you can check on Facebook as well on my Delroy Hall page, new page. Yeah, that is fantastic. Right, I'm gonna go. Moral injury and its psychological dramas. I'd just like to say welcome. Introduce myself. My name is Delroy Hall. I'm a trained psychotherapist, counsellor, teacher, and trainer. But also these sessions, which is just over 4 years now, they are no substitute for going to see your GP, psychologist, or getting proper help. These are just hints and tips, and in the 25-30 minutes I have each Tuesday evening, it's just lightly touching the surface on these issues. We'll be looking at moral injury for a little while now, and in fact it was somebody in the States who I was going to finish it about 3 weeks ago, and she just messaged and said, Delroy, it's a shame you're ending now. And I just heard from that there was more that was, even though they didn't say to continue it, but just a shame. And I started to do more inquiry. And also, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for individuals who've contacted me. Literally, I'm not just saying this just to kind of get people thinking, but people have contacted me in the UK, Australia, Canada, and other parts of the world as well. Okay, Sonia, if you look on Delroy Hall page, it just says Delroy Hall. If you can't find it on that, might have to put in a request to friend you or something like that. Anyway, but let me know either way. So we're looking at moral injury and its psychological dramas. If you're watching for the first time, welcome. Maybe just to say what moral injury is. I'm going to say it's an assault, really, and I've kind of avoided using the word, but it really is an aggressive assault on your values. Now, the idea of moral injury comes from the Vietnam War. When Jonathan Shea, a psychiatrist, noticed that when soldiers came back, he said they could deal with the grief, the terror, the horror, the loss of war, but he said they couldn't deal with the other aspects of war. For example, there weren't enough food, not enough water, the ammunition they were given wasn't up to standard. When they were injured, not very good care. When they should have been taken away, they weren't. So it was a kind of letdown or betrayal of the organization, the institution, the country who they were fighting for. So he noticed that what happened with soldiers, they could deal with the PTSD and all that type of stuff, but he said it was a moral injury, the kind of violation of values that led most of them to take their own lives. And we now know that moral injury doesn't just happen with returning soldiers from war, but also that moral injury happens a lot in the workplaces. What we consider burnout, there's a kind of stepping back and saying, no, there's something else going on here, which is far more bigger than just burnout. But this whole thing about moral injury, I'm going to say a bit more. So I'm really grateful for people who've shared their experiences with me. Some of it's been really horrific to hear, but also there's a friend of mine who's going through a really difficult time, and I said to him if it was okay to share his stuff. He said, yeah, Delroy, just do what you want to do. So I shall anonymize him, won't need to use his name, but just talk about maybe some of the stuff he's gone through. So I found this week really kind of moving, and I need to say first off that moral injury is not a mental illness, but it can lead to mental health problems, hence the psychological dramas. In terms of what happens to people psychologically. You can imagine if something can lead an individual to contemplate, say, taking their life, we know then it's something major and it's something significant. So these are the comments I've heard over the last few weeks since I've been doing this series on moral injury. Hold on a second. Yeah. So feeling alone and isolated with strange things happening to me. So these comments, these ideas, these thoughts that I'm using, I've actually asked individuals permission, and I did promise I will anonymize them. And as you can see this evening, I'm not in my usual studio, I'm elsewhere. So these comments such as, feeling alone and isolated with strange things happening to me. I have done nothing wrong. I was intimidated, harassed, and retaliated against, which impacted my mental health and physical health. And this is the person for Dell. I'm feeling up and down at the moment, and my head is in a mess. I recently started a new job, and after a few weeks, I quit. I just couldn't deal with it. My original company got rid of me 6 months ago. I should be over it now. And one of the things I say to my friend, and I'll say to us that are listening, quite often we really underestimate the impact that moral injury has on us. We really, really do. So weeks and months afterwards, people are reeling from the effect of moral injury. Some of the stuff. So, and one of the things that's really disturbing, that you've called something out, you then become the victim. We looked at the thing last week, didn't we? Davro, defense, attack, reverse victim, and you're now seen as the offender. So everything is switched, and you now become the target. You become the target. One of the worst still, you've called something out, you've been honest, you're ganged up against, you're then dismissed out of your job, and the very people who've thrown you under the bus, your work colleagues, are still in their job. That is impactful on our psychological well-being. How can it not be? And one of the things that Diane Silverman said about moral injury, she talks about PTSD being an external threat, but she said moral injury is a threat inside of us. And that's the thing that's really kind of difficult. It's a threat inside of us. So it makes for painful reading and even painful listening. So this whole thing about psychological distress, values are things that we live by. They're part of our existence. They're how we give meaning to the world. And I just want to say a little bit about values, because I've not really touched on it much, but it's really, really important. Values are the beliefs and principles that we believe are important in the way we live, we work, and how we interact with each other. They determine our priorities, and they guide our decisions, and they are the things that help us to work well with individuals. Now, there's 5 basic values that's kind of inherent in human beings: love, peace, truth, right, good conduct, and non-violence. The bedrock of human values, the bedrock of human emotions. Some people believe that these values are latent in every human being. It's kind of almost like a kind of core condition of our existence. They are natural and part of our characteristic. So when we experience a kind of violation, it really shocks us. Now, it's interesting. Let me just say this, and certainly if you're watching for the first time, I'm open to questions and inputs and your thoughts, or if not, you can DM me after the session. One of the things, as I've explored this and I'm talking with somebody, children are really good at this sense of justice and injustice, this sense of fairness. You hear young children saying, that's not right, it's not fair. But what happens soon enough, all that sense of injustice, that right and wrong is layered over by us as adults, us as parents, and also sometimes society. And I'm not convinced it ever goes away. And I think individuals who act outside of their nature, I think, I'm not going to talk about kind of natural justice, but I'm not too sure people can live with themselves very well. Let me give you an example. If people know they've done you wrong, when they meet you again, they are incredibly uncomfortable around you. I've seen it happen, and I guess it's happened to me when I know that maybe I was a bit harsh with somebody, which is, I guess, it's kind of different. But where you blatantly lied, where you've betrayed somebody, when you see the two again, maybe even years later, there's an awkwardness, because you know at an intuitive human level that you did not treat so-and-so right, and you should have spoken up for them, and you didn't. So this whole thing about the kind of values being kind of distorted and so forth. So And I want to say that moral injury is not about having a bad appraisal. It is something far worse than that. My friend who I spoke to, brilliant employee, won awards. The company works for is not a little family business. It's a mega million company. And he won quite a lot of awards and all the rest of it. And he'd been there for years. And within 4 months, things started to go wrong. Within 4 months, it was out. And I remembered when we met, I shan't say when we met, and I remember listening to him thinking, how long is he going to last at this place? Because I could hear the signs of this thing is not going to end very, very well. And it was literally, I think it was 2 weeks later on, he phoned me to say that they'd got rid of him. And this whole psychological drama, he wanted to meet up with me recently, made the appointment, then he contacted me, no, I don't want to meet up with you. And then I called him again, and then we met up. This whole up and down, what do I do? What don't I do? Who am I now? And all the rest of it. And what happened, he got a job, and I was livid because he wasn't ready, and he knew I was livid. And then he started the job, you can't stop him, big grown man. And then he kind of quit after a few weeks. And what's really affected him, and when we have moral injury, there's something that kind of sticks in our craw. And for him, he said, Del, I thought I'd be coasting to retirement. And why has this happened now? And we explored that. And I'm not going to say anything more than that. We explored that. But next week, I'm going to say something about moral injury. I want to offer another perspective on moral injury. So, as I said, he's been now gone out of the company for a few months now, and he can't. He thinks he should be back on it, but he just can't function, and that's what moral injury does. It really messes up your head and it disturbs you psychologically. And as I said before, and I will keep reiterating, we underestimate the lingering effects that moral injury has on our humanity and our psychological well-being. I just want to say something quick about the word drama. I use drama because dramas are great things. It comes from the Greek word. It's either an act or a deed, but the slang form means lying or an exaggerated reaction to life events. Further aspects are an angry scene or angry dispute. And I contend that when we experience moral injury, there is an angry scene, there's an angry film being played out in our minds constantly, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. And what happens in dramas, really good dramas, as you know, there's twists, there's turns, the things that are not clear, and then quite often the audience is left to work things out for themselves. And that's what happens with moral injury when people experience it at a psychological level, emotional level. It disturbs them that much. Why me? Is this really happening? A whole range of questions that really the individuals question about their own existence. One of the things I've said about moral injury is that it causes, one of the problems, of course, it causes this internal turbulence, which we don't seem to be able to get out of. And I've spoken about guilt, shame, all those type of things. But also these emotions are kind of crippling. Self-isolation, which is really bad for us, self-loathing, or spiritual existential crisis. Some psychologists are saying that moral injury is so injurious. It is more than just a psychological and emotional experience. It is a spiritual experience. So that's kind of really interesting. There is a definition that somebody has spoken about spiritual. There's a book called the Twin Wounds of War. So the guy talks about, Timothy Mallard talks about moral injury, but also talks about spiritual injury. And he has a whole definition around that. So I just want to so drama, twists, turns, and we know the dramas, there's excitement, and then you're not too sure what's going on, and sometimes the audience is left to figure things out. You know those films sometimes where the film is left, you don't know whether the person's died or not. And one of the things that's really disturbing, in an article published by did a research on NHS staff, that moral injury caused people to think and say, I need to get this right, how people felt was this: if I die, they do not care. There's this feeling that you've given your all to this company, and now this has happened to me. And in terms of the psychological drama, if I die, they don't care. And I've got to be honest, in some organizations that I've seen, people have reported, people have spoken to me, that somebody takes their own life and it's business as usual. The show must go on. There may be an acknowledgement, but it's business as usual. Because we've got to make the profits, and it's oh gosh, because we really get into something about the capitalist system and this and that and all the rest of it. That's the capitalist system, but quite often if those things are happening in the workplace, it's down to leadership not caring about its staff. I've always said this, you may have heard me say this before: if things are going really good in a workplace, check what's happening at the top. If things are happening really bad at the bottom, look what's happening at the top. This whole thing around leadership is incredibly important. And I don't know if there's any leaders watching this evening. This is not about blame, but you do have a responsibility, and you can change the culture and environment in which you are working, but it takes courage. I'm not saying it's easy. It takes courage, and it can be that you say, well, it's business as usual. But I suspect for many people, beneath all the facade of carrying on normally, there's a sense of guilt knowing that it should be a lot different. It should be a lot better. We're not treating people better. And I would say to you, if you're a leader, hearing my voice, if you're thinking like that, that's your own conscience telling you there's things that I can do and I need to do it now. So what are some of the things in terms of the psychological dramas that happens to individuals? Well, there's about 4 or 5 I'm going to list off. There's loads, but first thing, of course, is intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts are unwanted, uninvited, unpleasant thoughts that occupy our mind. Sometimes the thoughts are violent, they're aggressive, they're unpleasant. They interact, they disturb us, and they disturb us functioning normally. They come from nowhere. And one of the things, if you're experiencing psychological distress, and I have done in time past, there's this real fear of things going out of control. And one of the things for me and for lots of people, our mind is really, really important. And if we feel that we're losing control of our mind, it is scary. And it might just give us an insight into people who have major psychotic episodes. And we say that they're mad and all that type of stuff, but individuals that I know who've experienced it, they'll talk about the terror, the horror of losing their minds and losing what's going on inside of them. So this intrusion, thoughts and memories, things coming out of nowhere, popping into our consciousness, disturbing us in terms of, in fact, disturbing our normal functioning, our interaction with people. Worse still, they disturb our sleep. I've written in the article during the week that dreams are silent night messengers. However, Megan Chance says this: you learn to run from what you feel. That's why you have nightmares. To deny is to invite madness. To accept is to control. I want to read that again. You learn to run from what you feel. That's why you have nightmares. To deny is to invite madness. To accept is to control. One of the things in counseling now, once upon a time, if you had dreams, you didn't tell. Now, this is once upon a time, so I like to think that things have changed. That if you had dreams, I was always informed, don't tell psychiatrists you've had dreams, because what they would do is up the medication. Sorry, any psychiatrists that are listening, but for counselors, psychotherapists, and psychoanalysts, dreams are really important. I can never remember which way around it is. Recurring dreams, nightmares, unfinished business, unresolved issues. It's saying something. And what happens is that the therapist is not a dream interpreter, because he or she has not had the dream, but the dream interpreter is the person who's had the dream. And the person then, through a process of time, if they can analyze what's going on in the dream, they more often time recover far quicker than just the kind of talking therapy. So this whole thing about dreams and nightmares, as horrid as they are, as frightening as they are, is saying something that needs our attention. So intrusive thoughts and memories, part of this kind of psychological trauma. The other thing I spoke about was emotional numbness. Some individuals emotionally shut down and detach as a kind of coping mechanism when things get really, really painful and difficult. And also, when people shut down, not only shutting down emotionally, but memory. And I've spoken to individuals who have experienced moral injury, and you ask them to remember what happened, and they remember things in bits. They can't remember it fully. A bit like the stuff I spoke about last week about the foggy brain. On Thursday, well, a few weeks before, on Thursday, I was listening to a lecture, and I was asked to present some work around trauma. And it was somebody who'd been a part of the Rwandan episode, those of us who remember it, 30 years ago. And he gave this lecture. So two things really stuck out to me. He gave this lecture, and the Rwandan and Tutsi and Hutu massacre happened when he was 21. This is what he said. Because I was asked to ask him a question about the paper. I was the first one. I said to him, I asked the question, how did it shape you? Without getting into the kind of real emotional detail, because it's a very public thing, there's about 40 people online. How did it shape you? This is what he said. He said, Delroy, this happened when I was 21. I have no recollection of life before I was 21 years old. And many of my friends have no recollection of life before the massacre. We can't remember the stories. We can't remember being at school. We can't remember the fairy tales. We can't remember the games we played. He said, we are a part of a WhatsApp group, and we cannot remember anything that happened before we were for him, before he was 21. And I was asked to do some stuff on trauma. And I quickly discovered all that I had didn't even begin to address the experience he had. And I said that to him, and he started laughing. He said, what happened when the massacre ended? He said, we had loads of psychiatrists who came from America to kind of charge in and to kind of help. And he said within the first day, they went back to their tents early because they couldn't deal with the stuff that they'd heard. And he said many went back really, really quickly. They just how they'd been trained didn't equip them to deal with the trauma. So emotional numbness, that can be one of the things that we experience when we go through difficult situations. Emotional moral injury is one, and also the whole thing around massacre. Loss of meaning and purpose. One of the things, of course, that what kind of helps us to function is having meaning and purpose. And then if we lose that, it's as though I said it's like a large black hole that just can't be filled. There's this kind of void, and we're kind of frantically looking around for something that we can hold on to that give us some form of moorings. I'm going to say more about that next week. There can be social withdrawing. People kind of withdraw, partly because, well, I've gone through this experience and I must be the only one. And somebody contacted me during the week to say they had they just shared bits of what they'd gone through, a really horrific time. And they said they thought they were the only one, but they found a community on LinkedIn. And one of the things that's really important, that when we withdraw, we really need to be with people who can just validate our experience, but also to hear us, that we're able to kind of talk it out, because that's how we get better. I remember a friend of mine who started this new job, and he quit within weeks, and then people phoning him up wanting to find out how the new job was going, and he said, I just don't want to talk to them. I really don't. And he's not that type of individual. What his experience has just shattered his world so much. He's trying to pick up the pieces. Fortunately, he's got a really secure family. His kids are of an age where they understand, and he's felt really guilty about letting down the family. And they said, no, Dad, as long as you're okay, we're okay. Yeah, we understand you're going through something really difficult, but look, this is how it is. Other thing that can happen is self-destructive behaviors. We get involved with things that we wouldn't normally do, binge eating, gambling. When we have these psychological dramas, really, we can end up doing stuff that we would never normally do. And part of it is that we are beside ourselves, and we want to numb the pain, anesthetize the pain that we're feeling due to moral injury. And the other one, of course, is spiritual and existential struggle. Well, what does this mean? All that has been familiar, all that I've lived for, I knew what was right and wrong. I've tried to live my best. I tried to help people, and my world is shattered. How do I collect these? How do I put everything together? Well, let me tell you now, it's not a rush job. It's not a job that's going to take 5 minutes. I remember talking to my own supervisor, something that I'd gone through. I said to him, how can I decouple from this experience? He said, look, Delroy, it takes as long as it takes. There is no shortcut. There's no shortcut whatsoever. So my friend, he got a decent. This is one of the ways that companies who they know they've done wrong, and it's heinous in my books. They make you sign NDAs, large payoff. And I remember talking to somebody up north where this happened to. He didn't want to leave the company. This is somebody else. He didn't want to leave the company. And they had experienced moral injury, paid him off. And I said to him, at what cost? He says, yeah, you're right. I've got loads of money, but I'm now suffering. At what cost? And that's the thing for me. At what cost do we stay? So this whole thing about spiritual and existential struggle happens to lots of us. So there's in terms of treatment, there's lots of various models. I've said something before, but I want us to just give a thought for a moment for individuals who don't have access to the psychotherapy or psychological tools that we have. They have their own help. That is strengthening strong community bonds, developing relationships, which increases a sense of belonging. Remember, if we're feeling isolated and we're adrift, we've been severed from our familiar moorings, and now we're drifting. What we need now is people who can come by us, come close to us, to help us to find new moorings. We need people who will help us to get through this crisis together, a bit like the person who contacted me, who found a community on LinkedIn. There's a great quote by Margaret Mead, the anthropologist. She said this about small groups. She said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. One of the things I've said to individuals, I think somebody again contacted me on LinkedIn, when we go through this stuff, we need to talk about it, write about it. If you're part of an organization, write to the headquarters. I think, you see, one of the things that we do quite often, we kind of go into the shadows, but we really need to be writing about it. Go public with it, write about things. And the more organizations don't want to be exposed for being tardy, for being unprofessional. And what we do quite often, certainly in English culture, we kind of just skulk out the back door. And we can say a lot, even though we've signed NDAs, we can say quite a lot without kind of disclosing all and all. So I think sometimes we stay silent too long, and we need to be far more articulate. One of the things, of course, one of the great things that we can do, if you're listening to my voice and you're in a period of recovery, what you can do that can really help, if you can find somebody else who can help, find a committee, a group, do some volunteer stuff. You might be off work for a little while now as you recover. And what the volunteering can do, it takes your mind off your situation and you focus on the needs of others. That in itself can be therapeutic. I recall quite a few years ago now, I was asked by I might have mentioned it before, I can't remember now. I was asked by a deputy head of the Sixth Form College, Delroy, can you do a lecture on the benefits of kindness? And I said, yeah, never done anything like that before. And the amount of stuff that happens to our bodies when we are kind to another human being, what happens to our muscles and to our blood, to our immune system, to our respiratory system, how it relaxes us and how our body benefits, and we help other people, and it releases positive hormones within our body. It's incredible what happens to us when we exercise kindness and support of other people. So I concluded my article, and I just want to leave something in the box as I kind of finish this evening. In terms of support, there is psychological stuff which is really helpful, but I just wonder if you can find a community like the person who contacted me. I wonder in the city or the town, I don't know how you go about it, of course. I know that people just start things online. You don't have to meet people, you start things online, and it just kind of develops from there. I recall doing some training. Now, this was years ago, before the internet, and not that it was around, but nowhere near as prolific as it was. And I was doing some training, some counseling training, and I remembered meeting somebody. I can't remember the conversation, but her parents died within a very, very short space of each other, literally a few weeks or a few months. And what she did, she started a bereavement support group. And as far as I know, it is still going. So sometimes when we experience things, that sometimes can be the catalyst, one, to get something off the ground. Secondly, it's a part of our recovery, and it's helpful that we don't dwell on our situation. So emotional, moral injuries and its psychological dramas, I've kind of just touched on things a bit. Online, so I think it's just on YouTube. I don't think it's come up on LinkedIn. I'll point a link there. If you want to buy me a coffee, I don't charge for my services at all. Do you know what? I really enjoy this. I'd never thought that 4 years on I'd still be doing this, but I'm really enjoying it. And the topics are, I've just come and I've really enjoyed learning the topics. But if you want to buy me a coffee, please do. I never say no to coffee. And be this online and it's virtual one. However it comes across, whether it's black with milk, cappuccino, latte, or whatever, I don't really mind. But if you want to buy me a coffee, please do. I'll put the link in there. I can't do anything on LinkedIn, certainly, but if you want to DM me, and if you want to buy me a coffee and you're on LinkedIn, just send me a message and I'll give you the link and you can buy me a coffee. There you go. So listen, I'll enjoy the weather, because no, we're not too sure what's going to happen tomorrow. Enjoy the weather. Enjoy the rest of your week. And maybe next week we may be finishing moral injury, but it's a huge topic. And thank you very much for listening. Those of you who are experiencing moral injury, I hope that you're getting some help from this. Hope you can recover quicker. And in between now and next week, if you want to come back to me with something and you want to explore a little bit more, please do so. There's nothing off limits, but yeah, look forward to it. Okay, so take care, enjoy the rest of your evening and your week, and I'm going to get some food. Right, take care, all the best, bye-bye.